All right, we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Welcome to Iowa's Public Assistance Applicant Briefing presented by HSEMD. Sorry, trying to figure out how to switch this slide while I'm presenting. There we go. Okay. My name is Ashley Middleton. I'll be giving the public assistance section of today's briefing. If you have any questions, please email us at hscmdrecoverypa.iowa.gov, or you can visit our public assistance page on our website at homelandsecurity.iowa.gov. The presentation will be recorded and placed on our website as well. If you do have any questions while I'm going over this, you feel free to drop something in the chat. We have some team members that are monitoring that, or we'll have some time for questions after. FEMA's public assistance program is complex. This briefing is not intended to cover all aspects and requirements, but instead introduces you to the program, the overall process, key requirements, and how to apply. We've received 2 presidential disaster declarations, disaster 4779 for the April storms and tornadoes, and disaster 4796 for the June flooding that ended July 23rd. These declarations activate the public assistance grant program where eligible applicants can apply for federal grant funding with FEMA. The declaration identifies the designated areas, the eligible categories of work, and key dates, including the deadline to submit a request for public assistance, also referred to as an RPA. The deadline to submit for disaster 4779 is August 18th, and the deadline to submit for 4796 is September 9th. If you've been affected by both of these events, you do need to submit 2 requests for public assistance, 1 for each event. You can find the declarations on the public assistance page on our website or on FEMA's website by going to fema.gov/disaster and searching for Iowa. For those counties that are being added on for 4796, that information is still being updated on FEMA's website, but you can go ahead and request for public assistance on our website. The public assistance program provides grants to assist communities respond to and recover from major disaster or emergencies. Generally, the funding cost share is 75% federal, 10% state, and 15% local. For flood events, the state share is contingent on a county or city's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. If a county or city is not participating in NFIP, they would be responsible for the full cost share amount of 25% non-federal share. The first step in the public assistance process is to submit an RPA, request for public assistance. For those of you familiar with other grant programs, you can think of this like a notice of interest. Here in Iowa, you'll submit the RPA in our grant system, EM Grants Pro. If you're new to the system, you'll first need to register as a new user. You can find a tutorial on how to register and submit an RPA on HSEMD's website. And I'll also be emailing a guide after the presentation. When completing a request for public assistance, you'll need to verify your organization's information, such as your legal name, UEI number, FEIN number, organization type, and address. You'll need to identify a primary, alternate, and authorized contact. A key person to identify as your authorized contact is someone who's authorized to sign legal documents or agreements on behalf of your organization. Nonprofits, you'll need to complete an additional questionnaire and may need to provide additional documentation, such as your IRS ruling letter. Not sure if you have the right kind of damage, enough damage to submit an RPA. We encourage you to submit one anyway. And later on in the process, if you find out that PA program is not right fit for you, you can always withdraw. After your RPA has been approved, HSEMD initiates the funding agreement in our grants management system, EM Grants. The funding agreement must be signed and completed in order for HSEMD to release funds for approved and obligated projects. On the RPA, you identified a key initial contact. primary, alternate, and authorized representatives. The authorized representative is the person who's authorized to sign these legal documents, such as a mayor, county commission chair, city manager, etc. Here on the funding agreement, it will reconfirm that authorized representative and identify a chief financial officer. Checking the boxes to certify each section and submitting the agreement in the system applies an electronic signature. This must be done by either your authorized representative or chief financial officer in the system in order for their signature to be applied. No other signatures will be accepted. All subrecipients of federal funds are required to have UEI, unique entity identifiers. This identifier is required prior to award and is used for transparency and reporting of federal funding across all programs. Previously, this was the DUNS number that was used, but this changed in April of 2022. You'll need to provide your identity's SAM.gov UEI number when applying for public assistance. If you've recently applied for and received funding from HSEMD, we may already have your UEI file in EM grants. If you're not sure if you have a UEI assigned, you can check on SAM.gov. If you do not have a UEI assigned, you can request a UEI on SAM.gov. You don't need to register your entity. The full registration process is lengthy and is not required for subrecipients of federal funding. You'll want to follow the instructions on SAM.gov just to get a unique entity ID. We can also provide you some instructions on how to do this after the presentation. As we begin, we'd like to highlight a few key references and resources. The Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide is a comprehensive consolidated program and policy guide. The PAPPG includes detailed guidance on program requirements, including applicant, work, facility, and cost eligibility. The current version of the PAPPG can be found on FEMA's website. The PA program is authorized and governed by the Stafford Act, and program-specific regulations are found at 44 CFR 206. The Uniform Administrative Requirements, Cost Principles, and Audit Requirements for federal awards can be found at 2 CFR 200. We have a dedicated page on our website of the PA program. There you can find additional resources and information for Iowa's disaster declarations. EM Grants Pro is the state's grant management system. FEMA has a separate system, Grants Portal. You'll end up using both of these throughout the grant process. You'll start with the process by submitting an RPA, Request for Public Assistance, in our system, EM Grants Pro, and then create and document projects in FEMA's Grants Portal system. After projects are obligated, you'll return to EM Grants Pro to complete the project closeout and other activities. Another resource that may be beneficial to you is the PDAP. More on procurement will be covered later. First, FEMA's determination is the eligibility of the applicant. Then they look at the eligibility of the facility, the work, and the cost. We'll address these in a little more in detail. An applicant must be a state, territory, tribe, local government, or private nonprofit organization. Only certain PMPs are eligible applicants. To be eligible, a PMP must own and operate a facility that provides an eligible service. A facility is a building, system, equipment, built or manufactured for an improved and maintained natural feature. An example is a water distribution system. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and other systems that are components of the facility in which they operate are considered part of the facility. To be eligible, a facility must have sustained damage as a direct result of the disaster, be located within a declared area, be the legal responsibility of an eligible applicant, and not be under the authority of another federal agency. Work is categorized as either emergency or permanent. It must be required as a result of the declared incident, located within the designated disaster area, and the legal responsibility of the applicant. Emergency work must be completed within 6 months of the declaration date, and permanent work within 18 months. If additional time is needed to complete work, applicants must submit an extension request in writing to the state. Looking a little bit closer at emergency work is only eligible if the work addresses an immediate threat. FEMA defines an immediate threat as the threat of imminent danger, additional damage, or destruction reasonably expected to occur within 5 years. Category A is for debris removal. The deadline to complete Category A emergency work is 6 months from the declaration date, unless a time extension has been granted. Debris includes, but is not limited to, vegetative debris, construction and demolition debris, sand, mud, silt, gravel, boulders, white goods such as appliances or household items, and vehicles or vessel wreckage. Be prepared to provide estimates of debris quantity, photographs, the location of the debris, the location of any temporary reduction sites or permanent disposal sites, copies of permits if applicable, quantities of debris removed, reduced, disposed, and recycled with load tickets, and documentation of legal responsibility and immediate threat. If you have debris removal needs in your community, it is really important to take a closer look at these specific requirements, eligible criteria, and documentation needed outlined in the PAPPG. For example, grinding or removal of a tree stump is only eligible if 50% or more of the root ball is exposed, or if you hire a contractor to remove the debris, you may also need to hire a monitoring company. Category B is for emergency protective measures, such as search and rescue activities, sandbagging, etc. The deadline to complete Cat B emergency work is 6 months from the declaration date, unless a time extension has been granted. Permanent work categories are categories C through G. Is work required to restore a facility to its pre-disaster design and function in accordance with applicable codes and standards? Emergency repair or stabilization to eliminate or lessen an immediate threat is emergency work. All permanent work is subject to eligibility of the facility, as we discussed regarding PA's eligibility pyramid. So what does this really mean? Let's look closer at some definitions and examples. Pre-disaster design means the size or capacity of a facility as originally constructed or subsequently modified. It does not mean the capacity at which the applicant was using the facility at the time of the incident, if different from the most recent designed capacity. Pre-disaster function is the function of which the facility was originally designed or subsequently modified. For example, if you designed and constructed an administrative building but later altered it to be used as a school, then FEMA will treat the building as a school. However, if the facility was not formally altered to provide the function, FEMA provides PA funding to restore the facility to either A, the original pre-disaster, or B, pre-disaster alternate function, whichever costs less. This can get a bit complex. Identifying the damaged facility will help you navigate the ins and outs. Finally, FEMA looks at the cost. Is the cost directly tied to eligible work? Costs must be adequately documented, authorized, necessary, and reasonable. Costs must comply with the uniform guidance and the cost principles located at 2 CFR 200. Eligible costs include labor, equipment, materials, contract work, as well as direct and indirect administrative costs. We'll look at each one of these in a bit more detail. Be prepared to provide documentation to support the costs, including invoices, receipts, proof of payment, documentation of procurement, timesheets, payroll reports, and any applicable policies. FEMA refers to an applicant's own personnel as force account. FEMA reimburses force account labor based on actual hourly rates, plus the cost of the employee's actual fringe benefits. FEMA's criteria for reimbursing straight time labor costs differ depending on the type of employee and whether it is emergency work or permanent work. For permanent work, both straight time and overtime costs are eligible for budgeted and unbudgeted employees. For category B, emergency work, generally only overtime is eligible for budgeted employees. If you hire temp workers, unbudgeted employees, then straight time and overtime can be eligible. For category A, debris emergency work, both regular time and overtime is generally allowed. Labor costs must be supported by time and effort reporting for each individual. This documentation should include 100% of the hours worked during the period claimed, not just the hours for your public assistance project. It should also delineate time spent on each federal and non-federal activity. You'll need to be prepared to provide payroll documentation along with your payroll accounting policies. FEMA provides PA funding for the use of applicant-owned equipment, also known as force account equipment, based on hourly rates. If an applicant does not have sufficient equipment to effectively respond to the event, FEMA may provide funding for the purchase of equipment and either the use of the equipment based on hourly rates. It is important to note, in accordance with federal regulations regarding disposition, if the equipment is no longer needed for federally funded activities, FEMA may reduce the eligible funding by the equipment's current fair market value. FEMA publishes national equipment rates based on all costs associated with ownership and operation, except labor, including depreciation, maintenance, etc. What about leased equipment? PA funding is then considered based on the terms of the lease. You may need to demonstrate leasing was more cost-effective than purchase. You can also find all these equipment rates on FEMA's website, and there's a really easy way to search through their equipment to find what best fits the equipment that you used. Let's talk a little bit about procurement. Like everything else, documentation is key. Procurement non-compliance can jeopardize your PA funding. It is extremely important that you take time to review your written procurement policies and procedures to ensure they do not conflict with federal requirements. State government applicants must follow the same policies and procedures that they would use for procurements with non-federal funds. Comply with 2 CFR 200.322, procurement of recovered materials, and ensure that every purchase order or other contract includes any clause required by 2 CFR 200.326 contract provisions. Non-state applicants, counties, cities, local government entities, and PMPs must use their own written procurement procedure that reflect applicable state, tribal, and local government laws and regulations. However, your procurement policies just conform to applicable federal law and standards. Federal procurement requirements are outlined in 2 CFR 200.317 through 327. Additional resource guidance and training can be found on FEMA's website. If you have a conflict between rules, the general guidance is to follow the more restrictive rule. In an emergency or exigent situation, FEMA may reimburse costs incurred under a contract procured through a non-competitive proposal, also known as sole source. Many disaster recovery projects funded under the PA program do not meet FEMA's definition of emergency or exigency. It is important to document your justification and describe the emergency or exigent circumstance in your procurement records. FEMA is legally prohibited from duplicating benefits from other resources. If an applicant receives funding from another resource, for example, an insurance payment for the same work, FEMA reduces the eligible cost to prevent a duplication of benefits. FEMA will reduce eligible project costs for facilities that are insured by the actual or anticipated insurance proceeds. If an uninsured facility was damaged by flooding and is located within a special flood hazard area, FEMA will reduce the eligible amount by the maximum amount of insurance proceeds that could have been obtained from a standard NFIP policy, or the value of the facility, whichever is less. On permanent work projects, FEMA will require you to obtain and maintain a reasonable insurance to protect facilities against future loss. This is not required for facilities receiving damage of less than $5,000. Category Z management costs refer to grant management and administrative costs. This is different from project management activities for special projects such as construction oversight, monitoring contractor work. FEMA provides PA funding for management costs based on actual costs incurred up to 5% of the subrecipient's total award amount. Examples of activities that would be eligible are participating in a site inspection, participating in applicant briefing, developing the detailed damage description, preparing any reports, gathering documentation, requesting for public assistance funds. We encourage you to start tracking your time detailing with public assistance grants program now, and we'll provide an Excel sheet to do that after this webinar as well. So how does this all work? The general life cycle of disaster recovery for the PA program is organized into phases. After a presidential declaration, the state coordinates the applicant briefings. Within 30 days of declaration, interested applicants must submit the request for public assistance, RPA, and HSEMD's grant system, EM grants. In this case, disaster 4796 has received a time extension through September 9th. The state and FEMA then review the RPA to confirm the organization's eligibility as an applicant in the PA program. Once your RPA is approved, your organization has been determined to be an eligible applicant. HSEMD coordinates to a pre-award risk assessment. Our staff work with applicants to review agency capacity, policies, and procedures. This includes reviewing written procurement policies and their compliance with federal requirements. The results of the risk assessment inform us on how to monitor activities during the disaster. At this time, HSEMD also initiates the funding agreement, which is completed in EM grants. Funds for obligated projects cannot be released until this funding agreement is complete. Agreements are electronically signed in EM grants. Overall, our intent is to always have an HSEMD staff member available to support your support and guidance. Our field delivery team will provide one contact from the RPA to obligation for the project. Our grant management and monitoring team will provide one contact to support you from obligation to close out. Applicants are assigned to a program delivery manager through FEMA. Your PDMG will coordinate an exploratory call to get an initial understanding of impacts and discuss requirements and next steps. This call typically comes 1 or 2 weeks after submitting your RPA. At the exploratory call, the PDMG will coordinate a recovery scoping meeting with you. You should ensure that staff with knowledge of incidents related to the damages, emergency activities performed, and related costs attend this meeting. Applicants must identify and report all incident-related impacts to FEMA within 60 days of the recovery scoping meeting. To do this, you'll prepare and submit a damage inventory, also known as a DI. As you and the PDMG formulate the projects, information is entered, uploaded, and updated in FEMA's grants portal system. FEMA gathers project-specific information by conducting site inspections and requesting documentation. Damage information is the foundation of the overall project award. The scope of work and cost eligibility is tied to the eligibility of damage. Once FEMA, HSEMD, and you, the applicant, agree on the damages, descriptions, dimensions, projects are then scoped and cost. Documentation is reviewed, and once the final reviews are completed, projects are obligated. All the project formulation occurs in FEMA's grants portal system. Projects are paid out depending on the size of the project. The state share is not paid out until the project has been closed. The PDMG then will coordinate a recovery transition meeting to transition the applicant from the project development phase to the sub-award management phase. Amendments and time extension requests must be submitted in writing to HSEMD's. Consult with your state rep if you have any questions. Again, the first step, and if you remember nothing else from this presentation, is to submit a request for public assistance. Once approved, you'll be contacted by HSEMD to complete the funding agreement and pre-award risk assessment. The damage inventory will lay the foundation for all future actions, including project formulation, establishing the damage description dimensions, the scope of work, and all cost estimates, all which lead to the project obligation. You'll bring a draft of your damage inventory to the recovery scoping meeting, which starts your clock for 60 days in reporting damage. Similar to the RPA, if you're unsure of damages, we encourage you to include them. FEMA can always deny them, or you can withdraw them. FEMA has automated the project formulation process for Category A debris projects and Category B emergency protective measures. Your PDMG and your state rep will help you through creating the streamlined project application. The PDMG will work with you to identify sites and facilities that can be combined into one project, generally things that are organized based on categories of work and facility types. Then sites or facilities are identified that should be formulated into separate projects. A project worksheet or PW is created for each project. It captures the related disaster damage facility scope of work and costs. Projects must meet the minimum threshold of $3,900 for eligible costs. FEMA administers funding for large and small projects differently. The threshold between small and large is $1,037,000. The funds for these projects differ. Small projects, for example, you may have a road repair that is estimated at $500,000. If it ends up costing you $600,000, then you will only receive the $500,000. However, if you only spend $450,000, then you will get $500,000. Therefore, when costing out projects that fall under the $1 million threshold, we recommend being careful with estimating costs. Large projects over $1 million are paid out based on actual costs related to the scope of work. Here in Iowa, for small projects, the federal share, 75%, is paid out up to $250,000 upon obligation. And then after that, you can receive up to 75% of the federal share through requests for reimbursements in our EM Grants Pro system. 406 hazard mitigation is any sustained action taken to reduce or eliminate risk to people and property from natural hazards and their effects. Here we are looking to see if we can build back better. As you identify your damages, note which damages could be built back better. Your FEMA PDMG and HSEMD representatives will discuss potential for hazard mitigation activities with you. FEMA reviews each project to ensure compliance with applicable environmental and historical preservation requirements. Additional information on EHP can be found in the Papa G Chapter 7A and Appendix A. We'll also be sharing a green sheet that provides disaster-specific guidance after the webinar. Projects near waterways or floodplains require a cooperative effort between the applicant and regulatory agencies. You may be required to submit application for permits to both the DNR and the Army Corps. This used to be a joint application, but now you have to do both separately. Additional information on submitting applications through DNR and the Army Corps can be found on their websites. FEMA requires a response from both the DNR and USACE. Improved projects. The applicant may wish to make improvements to a damaged facility that are not required by eligible codes or standards. A project that restores a pre-disaster function of a facility and incorporates improvements or changes to the pre-disaster design is an improved project. For example, adding a tornado safe room to City Hall. An alternate project is when an applicant may determine that the public welfare is not best served by restoring the function of a damaged facility. When this occurs, the applicant must obtain FEMA's approval to apply PA funding towards a different facility or facilities. FEMA refers to this as an alternate project. For example, putting the cost to repair an old warehouse to buying a new fire truck. Alternate procedures for permanent work under Section 428 of the Stafford Act is designed to achieve better recovery outcomes and simplify the delivery of assistance. FEMA caps federal funding based on the aggregate federal share of the approved estimated cost. FEMA will complete a fixed cost estimate for a large permanent work project and will send a fixed cost offer to the applicant for consideration. If the applicant accepts the offer, FEMA considers it an alternative procedures project. If the offer is not accepted, the project will be processed utilizing standard procedures and final funding will be based on actual costs. So far, in Iowa, we have not found the alternative procedure of accepting a fixed cost offer beneficial for applicants and feel that the benefit can be achieved by going through the standard process and request either an alternate or an improved project instead. PA funding is aimed at restoring facilities based on pre-disaster design and function in conformity with current applicable codes and specifications and standards. Codes and standards need to be implemented even if they are more stringent than local codes. The purpose of consensus-based codes, specifications, and standards is to promote resiliency and reduce future risk in repair and replacement of damaged facilities funded under the PA program. FEMA Policy FP-104-009-11 outlines the framework and requirements. Appendix A of the policy lists specific codes, specifications, and standards by facility. FEMA also maintains a building science resource library that may be of benefit to you. We, as the state and your PDMG, can go over this with you more in detail. Multiple layers of government work in partnership to administer the PA program once a disaster has been declared. As the federal award agency, FEMA's primary responsibilities are to develop and issue program guidance and policies, award the prime PA disaster grant to the state, assist with development and final approval of projects, and obligate funds. The state of Iowa is the recipient of the prime grant. As the pass-through entity, HSEMD works in partnership with FEMA to manage and administer the program in Iowa. HSEMD has a dedicated team of PA staff. Our staff support the administration of subawards, provide technical assistance, and monitor project progress and compliance. FEMA uses both the term applicant and subrecipient to identify the local partner. An applicant has applied for assistance under PA, while a subrecipient has received a subaward. The grant requirements for the prime award flow down to the subrecipient. Subrecipients are accountable for the compliant use of federal funds and completion of projects in compliance with the PA program policy, terms, conditions, and regulations. Documentation. This must be retained for at least 3 years from the day your account with HSEMD is closed. We recommend organizing your documentation as if it were going to be audited. You'll want to establish a disaster-specific file to maintain documentation for each of your PA projects and include all supporting documentation for claimed costs. The Single Audit Act requires federal grant recipients who expend $750,000 or more in federal funds in a fiscal year to have a single audit performed. Common audit findings include missing or incomplete documentation, ineligible or unreasonable costs, procurement issues, funds were commingled or were not tracked separately in accounting systems. So this is the third time seeing this slide, so hopefully we've emphasized enough your need to submit an RPA. We encourage you to be mindful of the deadlines for the different disasters, log into our EM Grants program, and submit a request for public assistance. As we've mentioned throughout the briefing, there's a lot of resources available to you, and most important resource you have is your state rep and your FEMA PDMG. Aside from the public assistance program, there are a number of additional disaster recovery resources. FEMA's HGMP provides funding for eligible mitigation measures that reduce disaster losses. HSEMD is the pass-through entity for the HMGP program in Iowa. More information can be found on our website. FEMA's Community Disaster Loan Program is available to local governments adversely affected by major disasters. Funds can be used to carry on existing essential municipal services or to expand such essential functions to meet disaster-related needs. The loan has an initial term of 5 years and can be extended to 10 years, and I will email out some additional information on that. The State of Iowa Contingent Fund is designed to meet disaster-related necessary expenses or serious needs through a loan. Funding cannot exceed $1 million per fiscal year and has a 20-year repayment schedule with no interest. This fund is administered by HSEMD. For more information on any of these programs, you can contact us at hscmdrecoverypa@iowa.gov, and we'll get you in touch with the appropriate contact. The SBA provides a low-interest disaster loan to help businesses and homeowners recover from declared disasters. Additional information and how to apply can be found on the SBA website. Through the CDBG-DR program, HUD provides flexible grants to help cities, counties, and states to recover from presidentially declared disasters. The Iowa Economic Development Authority is the pass-through agency for the state of Iowa, and additional information can be found on HUD or IEDA's website. The U.S. Department of Labor provides national dislocated worker grants to provide funding to create temporary employment opportunities to assist with cleanup and recovery efforts. Iowa Workforce Development is the pass-through agency for the state of Iowa. Additional information can be found on their websites. FHWA's Emergency Relief Program helps communities hurt by natural disasters and catastrophic events and provides funding to repair damaged roads and bridges. Generally, this includes interstates, freeways, and major collector roads. The Iowa Department of Transportation is the pass-through entity for the state of Iowa, and you can find more information on this on DOT's website. Finally, the USDA's Farm Service Agency offers a variety of programs to help farmers, communities, and businesses that have been hard hit by natural disaster events. Programs provide livestock assistance, farm loans, farmland damage, and crop loss assistance. Visit farmers.gov to learn more. This concludes our public assistance applicant briefing. I will stop sharing real quickly and see if we have somebody from mitigation on. Oh, there you are, Steve. I see you raising your hand. All right. Let me see if I can give you rights to share your screen.
All right, thanks, Ashley. I'm gonna try to share this quickly. All right, here we go. All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. I have about 18 slides, but I promise to keep everything really short. Most importantly, our contact info is contained in the slide, so please reach out with any questions and discuss anything further. Yeah, this is the Iowa Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program. And we'll just briefly cover, like Ashley had, the 406 mitigation, the hazardous mitigation grant program, flood mitigation assistance, building resilient infrastructure communities grant program, and then building code adoption and enforcement. So FEMA's hazardous mitigation assistance provides funding for eligible mitigation measures that reduce future disaster losses and is really in a sustainable action that reduces or eliminates long-term risk to people and property from future disasters. PA mitigation is a key element in building resiliency, so please keep this in mind. If permanent work is declared, that you'll be prepared with a couple of ideas for mitigation projects. Again, there's a lot of stuff on these slides, so I'm just gonna go over them quickly and everything will be provided. The HMA program includes HMGP, the flood mitigation assistance, which is an annual competitive program. Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, or BRIC, is another annual competitive program. And Building Code Adoption and Enforcement, which we currently have funding available for. So if we're going to mitigate things, we're focusing on the FEMA lifelines, the security and safety, food, hydration, shelter, health and medical, water systems, energy, communications, transportation, and hazardous materials. So we just zoom in on one of the single lifelines, energy, for example. We could ask if you're mitigating the grid or fuel, and if it's the grid, then you can sort of dial in deeper down, and we could consider generation, transmission, or distribution. And a few highlights of the program: HSEMD is a conduit for applications and funding to and from FEMA. The communities are the conduit for the applications and funding to and from the homeowners and citizens. And sort of a best practice is to contact HSEMD's Mitigation Bureau prior to posting and soliciting documentation and entering into any agreements. Post-award agreements cannot begin until the FEMA application is approved. So these are some of the planning requirements. Local jurisdictions are required to have FEMA approved local hazard mitigation plan in order to be eligible for HMA programs. Of all the HMA programs, HMGP is one of the most flexible of all the funding sources. It provides funding when a presidential disaster declaration is declared to state, tribes, local governments, certain nonprofit organizations, for any measure to protect or an action proposed to reduce risk of future damage, hardships, loss of suffering. And the cost share is generally 75% federal, 15% local, and 10% state. The slide shows the eligible mitigation activities. There's property acquisition, structural elevation, localized flood risk reduction, secondary power sources, generators, hardening, undergrounding electrical systems, warning systems like sirens, and tornado safe rooms. The ranking and selection, complete proposals evaluated using prioritization criteria primarily follows the state hazard mitigation plan. Again, we're here to help determine if the project is best suited for HMGP or PA mitigation. Time of events for an HMGP application, generally it's 1 to 12 months following the declaration. There's a notice of fund availability posted. You submit a notice of interest, develop the application, and then submit the application to FEMA for review and approval. And obviously our Bureau mitigation staff would help all along the way with that process. Flood mitigation assistance is an annual program that makes federal funds available nationally to reduce or eliminate the risk of repetitive flood damage to buildings and structures insured under the National Flood Insurance Program. Must be participating NFIP community. And funds are used for projects that reduce or eliminate the risk of repetitive flood damage to buildings insured by the NFIP. In BRIC, or the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities grant program, is annual. It supports communities that implement hazard mitigation projects to reduce the risk from disasters. Similar projects and eligibility to HMGP, sort of shovel-ready or phased infrastructure projects. The city of Coralville was selected for a $20 million BRIC 2022 application, and Denison Municipal Utility was selected for a $12 million BRIC 23 application. And we're currently working on BRIC 24 applications and looking for additional communities to work with. A significant portion of the technical score is based on building code adoption. It's around 20% of the score. It's very important to have current building codes adopted. If you reach out to the local jurisdictions to confirm and encourage that they have adopted the latest editions of the I codes. In addition to that, there's a B6, it's the building code effectiveness grading schedule. We actually have information on that as well. So these are both two things in the technical score that are controllable by the local communities. And again, just a very important aspect of assessing the $1 million in grant funding is communities adopting and updating their codes to the most current additions and or improve the implementation to build more resilient communities. Communities implementing current codes bolster their competitiveness for the bulk of hundreds of millions in competitive FEMA BRIC funding. HSEMD currently has the obligated grant funding and technical assistance. It's currently available for adoption and implementation of codes and enhance existing adopted codes to more current requirements or higher standards, and to develop professional workforce capabilities relating to building codes through technical assistance and training. This slide is really busy here, but if you are interested later, all of these slides will be provided. The information on this slide, it's actually very useful and easy to read. You just have to really zoom in on it, but it covers each of the HMA programs, eligible projects under each of the programs, and then it shows the various program cost shares. So again, most importantly, please reach out directly for additional information to coordinate an introductory meeting and discuss potential project types. We're always very happy to start work on mitigation projects. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. This concludes our applicant briefing. I can hold on for a few minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, we will follow up with an email with any slides or resources mentioned and a link to our website where you can find a recording of this.